Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for being here. You know when you meet people, and every now and then you meet one, and they're just good at everything. And in fact, not just are they good at everything, but they're just a really nice person as well. So you can't even hold it against them. Well, that's what's happened with today's guest, James Koons. So, James has had a phenomenal life so far. He's been a police officer in DC. He's best known for being an actor and being on the screen. He's been in Inheritance, Hawaii Five-O, Battleship. He's been in Lost, Off the Map, Species 2, all sorts of stuff. Not only that, he's an avid musician. In fact, the music that you heard at the start and will hear at the end was written by him, called Another World, and it's really good. And he collects guitars. And when I saw what guitars he's got, they're all cool person guitars as well. So you just can't help but like the guy. So I got to know him via another ridiculously cool person, my friend Jeff Nuccetelli. James reached out to Jeff when he started having anomalous experiences and having some sightings at his home in Hawaii. And Jeff put him in touch with me. So what you're about to see is a really cool conversation. This is the first time we'd ever met, and I'll let you in on a secret. So as soon as we'd finished recording, James and I just carried on chatting for probably another hour and a half about music and guitars and all sorts of stuff. So he's one of those people where you just meet them and, yep, we're friends now. So I hope you really, really enjoy this. Grab yourself a cup of tea or whatever you fancy, chill out and hang out with three good friends talking about a load of really interesting topics. And I'll see you soon.
Yeah, I'm going to ask James. I saw that he has produced his own music. I found it.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it is not, they're really, I wouldn't call them songs because I'm not a great songwriter or lyricist by any means, but they're just little pieces,
Yeah.
that I kind of record. I've never recorded, so I just was like, I've always played. I've played in a couple of bands and um, always played at home with records and things like that, figuring out, taking the needle and moving it and putting it back to hear the little phrase that I'm trying to get. Yeah, so I tried it on my own, and I have this little DAW workstation upstairs. It's
Yep.
a Roland. It's like an all-in-one Roland from like, it's old now, old technology now, but yeah. So I got a couple pieces out there. Not
Great
great, but
stuff.
still fun.
Well, if you dig doing it, man, it's a wonderful thing. It's very meditative. Where
Yeah.
can we find that then? Is that on YouTube or what?
It's on. I know it's on Amazon and Apple Music.
Right.
Yeah, and also I'm not a great engineer either, so it's you're feeling your way through, and some sound better than others, and it's a lot to do on your own if you don't know what you're doing, which I don't.
Yeah,
I've definitely.
it came
Sorry,
out
Jeff.
great. Yeah, it came out really good. The one song I found, do I still have that up?
One is pretty heavy.
Yeah, I found Another World.
Oh yeah, okay,
That
yeah,
was
that's
yeah, that was really cool.
thanks, man. Thank
Yeah,
you. I appreciate it.
yeah, we'll put the links in.
Yeah,
Okay,
100%.
sure.
100%. I think people would enjoy that. So how did you guys first start talking then?
Jeff, you want me?
No, I'll let you go ahead and start.
Okay. I heard Jeff on, I forget what podcast it was, but I heard him talking about something he'd experienced, and I hadn't heard anybody else describe what I'd seen before until I heard Jeff. And so I reached out to him on LinkedIn, and it was very cryptic because I don't have premium, and it's only so many characters, so I had to sort of shorten everything. But I said, you're the only person that's ever described what I've seen. I'd love to compare notes. And then we had a little chat, and yeah, that's how it started.
Yeah, here we are.
Yeah, it's funny how these networks seem to be forming, isn't it? Like there's I think people talk about the stigma and all of that, but I think we're definitely in a time now where we've had people just lead with a bow wave, like your David Grushes and stuff that have come forwards, and credible people that have been brave enough to tell their story, and it really does inspire others. And then these people are making networks, and it's it's some interesting stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels more okay to come out and talk about things that you've seen if you've seen them.
yeah.
I think it's going away, the stigma. I mean, it's still there for some, but you know, not for I don't feel it anymore.
Mm.
Yeah,
So so how did your own kind of experiences start then? And you know, talk us through it if you would.
I never had an experience until I moved to Hawaii, um, which is in 2005. I never saw anything. I've seen satellites. I certainly was into aircraft. I've been to several air shows and just always kind of, as a residual hobby, liked, you know, anything about aircrafts and military aircrafts. Um, so yeah, but when I got out here, I just started looking up, I guess, more than I used to, or maybe there's more visibility, or I don't know what it was, but I think the first thing I saw was I wrote off as a. I told Jeff I wrote it off as a weather balloon, but later, upon reflection and looking up, Googling images of weather balloons, it looked nothing like what I saw. And it was basically, I was in my backyard, broad daylight, um, and just happened to look up. I wasn't looking for anything. I just happened to look up and I saw perfectly round, it looked metallic, uh, orb, um, just perfectly still. And I don't remember if it was a breezy day. Usually there's a breeze out here, but it wasn't moving. It wasn't blowing around. It wasn't doing anything. And it was relatively close. Like, to my eyes, it looked about this big.
Wow.
And it seemed to be, you know, sort of a 11 o'clock-ish angle right over my neighbor's house, like a little, seemed like maybe 3 or 4 houses away, but high enough up that I could see it from my house. Um, and I just looked at it for a minute. I could see the sun reflecting off the one side of it, and I was like, "Huh." And I just there's a weather station around here, around where I live, but I really didn't have the bearing of the direction my house faced, where this weather station was. And later, when I learned where the West weather station was, I'm like, that was nowhere near where I saw this thing. This was over my neighborhood. So, you know, I just looked at it for a couple seconds. My mind just sort of wrote it off as a weather balloon. And I went about what I was doing. And then I looked back up and it was gone. And I was like, well, maybe it floated away or whatever. But again, it was just perfectly still. And then after I spoke with Jeff, you know, I looked it up and Googled what different types of weather balloons look like, and just not even close, nothing even remotely close. And so that was like a first sighting that I really wasn't aware I was even seeing anything. And then that makes you look up a lot more often. You know, you start going, wow, what was, you know, I need to see that again if I can. And the second thing was the two other times were with my wife outside. We are outdoor people. We like to be outside when the weather's nice. And I like to look at the Milky Way. The visibility is really great out here. So we're always looking up, and I like to see satellites are interesting to me. And, you know, so one night, corner of my eye, I caught this really bright sort of a flash, and it was pretty high up and pretty far away, but it was so bright. It was like a spotlight. And I looked in the direction it was. I wasn't really sure where it came from because it was just peripheral at first. And then 10 seconds later, it did it again. And it was just like a spotlight on, off. And I was like, wow. And then another one a few seconds later. I couldn't tell you how far away, but you know, it was far away. It had to be a quarter mile or a half mile from the first one. Same sort of altitude, same angle, just the opposite direction. And they were alternating flashes like every 10 seconds, super bright. to the point that I called my wife and I was like, watch this. And we were counting it off like 10 seconds and then boop, and then another 10 seconds and then boop. I was like, no, look over here. And it just kept going for a long time. There's no noise, no other lights, no blinking, anything. And then it just stopped after a period of like 10 minutes of watching it. It just stopped. And I was like, what was that? Because it was too, when I say bright, you know, when the moon is so bright that it sort of lights up, you know, like your yard, or you know, it's really bright. It was that kind of a brightness.
Wow.
It was a strange brightness. It was very, very bright. And so I knew it couldn't, and so still I knew it couldn't be anything that I've never seen anything like that before. So yeah, and then the weirdest thing was, I mean, that was strange, but the weirdest thing was a strobing light like Jeff has seen, softly, slowly pulsating, almost relaxing light. And it was just ascending straight upwards. And it looked like it was, maybe we're close to Pearl Harbor. So I was like, well, maybe it's something over there. And it just kept going. It was really clear night. And we just, I called my wife. I was like, what is this? And we just watched it ascend, slowly strobing straight up to the point that we were like completely craned back. It eventually just went out of sight from being too high. You know, it just went out of, couldn't see it anymore. And my wife goes, oh, well, I'm going to go inside and shower. And she turns and leaves. And I'm like, what? How could you just, you know? And I was still sort of in awe, standing there, watching where it went out of sight. Rube, when a few seconds later, super bright, super fast, immediate, like a blue neon straight bar light, streaks across my vision. And it looked like it was maybe a quarter of a mile long. And it was heading towards the ocean. But it started at the point that I saw the other one at first, low. So the other one goes up, disappears. I'm like standing there. And then this blue thing just streaks by straight across. And I've seen plenty of meteorites and shooting stars. And, you know, there was no sort of residue coming off the back of it. It was just like somebody turned on a straight neon light and then turned it off. And I told Jeff, I feel silly for describing it this way, but I've never seen anything like that. So the only thing I can say is it looked like the Millennium Falcon hitting, you know, that blue that's behind it when it hits the warp drive or whatever. That's what it looked like. And it all went out at the same time. And again, that was completely silent. And it just took my breath when I literally heard myself make a noise when I saw that. I was like, oh, you know, like it just, I gasped, and because it was startling. It was just the strangest. I mean, it just blows your mind when you see something like that. It's hard to describe in a way that will convey how incredible it looked. You know, it's really hard to describe. So that's the best I can do, is say Millennium Falcon. But yeah. And now, so I'm looking all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was, I mean, I wanted to ask you one or two questions about it. So was the first object the same color as the blue, or was it a different color, or?
No, the strobing light was just a soft white, you know, it wasn't like a light on any aircraft, you know, that blinks. It wasn't that small. It was as if the whole thing was the light. And it was like almost like if a basketball was a light and just floating up and doing this slow, soft pulse. And it was very mesmerizing. You know, it was very calming. You could just, it was really quite remarkable.
Yeah,
it was white, and the other thing was like neon blue.
Mm,
Yeah,
wow. I've heard Kevin Knuth, the physicist, talking about when stuff blue shifts, it can go that fast that it just we see the tail end of it as it goes into ultraviolet kind of thing.
really.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether that applies specifically to what you've seen because I've seen weird stuff a lot too, and it seems to be it seems to be gathering pace in the amount of stuff that I've seen, and I certainly don't think I'm a special little flower. So if you know there's other people out there having these
Sure.
experiences too, but like you said with your wife, I just in case my friend does watch this, I don't want to make it sound like I'm criticizing him, but my friend and his wife were with my mother and I at a Mexican restaurant on the beach in Spain, and we look up and there's this orange orb with three little blue lights behind it, and kind of they were just it was over a cliff. There's nothing there. There's no buildings. There's no electricity. Nothing. And then the orange one comes down to sea level, and we watched it. And I said to our friends, we probably watched it for half an hour before I went through everything in the book that this could be apart from a UAP. And I was like, okay, guys, if you want to look over there, there's, that there's some, and they were just like, oh, wow, yeah, that's really cool. Anyway, I just got back straight back to, and my mum and I were like, we were stood up and videoing it, and then like, like, what's this? It could it be this? Could it be the lights on a squid boat? And
What do you
we
think that
tried.
is?
I don't know, but it's something. I mean,
It's like a
my
sleep of some sort where they don't want
it's
to
a
acknowledge.
yeah. It's a really selective thing. Like I've thought about this so much because we watched these things for probably 2 hours, and at numerous points we were going, like, come on, the people would kill to see this, and they were like, yeah, it's really cool. Um, but my friend that was with us is a massive aviation nut as well, just like me. Like we used to grow up talking about Harriers and tornadoes and play,
Yeah,
all the really nerdy stuff. And it was just as if there was something different going on,
yeah,
that just they just were like artificially not interested. It
yeah.
was so
Trying
weird.
to, trying to almost just deny that it's odd,
Right.
right? Like that's what I got from my wife, not slagging her off, but
Yeah.
that's what I got. I was like, how could you just go in and shower after that? Like, what? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how's your head changed? I mean, has that's a presumptive question. Has it changed kind of your outlook on things, and where's your
I
head at
mean,
now?
yeah, it absolutely made me start looking into this topic more. Like I've always been fascinated by it, but like I said, I'd never seen anything. So there's only a certain level of interest for me that I could have until that point. And then it's kicked into overdrive because you've seen it. You've
Yeah.
seen something you can't explain. And whether it's, our tech, it doesn't matter because, like you said, I've been sort of an aviation fan of aviation and all types of aircraft. My whole life has been fascinating. So it's if it's our tech, then it's just another really cool aircraft I want to see more of,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what it is. I can't say what it is. I can only say what it isn't according to my experience. And it was definitely something new. And, when you're 58, you, new things you see less and less in life.
Yes.
So when you see something new, it gives you this, it's like an endorphin release. Like it's amazing. It's like
It invigorates your curiosity. Yeah.
absolutely. And just on a lesser scale, I recently went to Vegas and saw U2 at the Sphere, and I've seen a lot of concerts. Okay. And so you just can't be prepared for the sphere.
Mm.
You know, when you see that show, that's like a step into the future. And so it's on the same level, that was something new in the area of music that I'd never seen. And it just, that blew me away. So this, you know, seeing something still in the sky, or something that goes so high it just goes out of sight, or something that streaks across your vision and, you know, startles you, it, you know, it almost doesn't matter what it is, but you can't help but wonder what, you know, is it our tech or is something here? And so since, yeah, you get like this enthusiasm for the topic that wasn't as prevalent before, and so you start seeking out, you know, others like Jeff, and you want someone to have seen what you've seen so that you don't feel
Like,
crazy.
yeah.
And so I was Googling blue streak in the sky. You know, I was like trying to search for any other similar thing, and I hadn't found it. And it makes you sort of start feeling like, how could I be the only one that have seen that? You know, like, how can that not be, like, it was a quarter of a mile at least, and it was right over a densely populated residential area. I
Yeah.
couldn't have been the only one to have seen that.
No.
Yeah. And that's the wild thing, right? That we were talking about earlier, where I'm sure other people saw something that night, but they probably just went, weird, and went right back to life.
Shooting star, you know,
Yeah,
whatever.
it's a shooting star or
Even
whatever.
though it was
However
blue.
their mind rationalizes, and then they just ignore it and they go right back to life. And many people like that might not even tell that story at work or 20 minutes later. And then you have people like us that we see it and now it's like, uh-oh, here we go. We're in this rabbit hole forever now.
I got the
Yeah,
bug.
a one-way door quietly closes behind you. And,
Yeah,
oh God, what now? Yeah.
yeah, it is. It's a shift. It's a major shift. I mean, you can't help but, you know, if you're a curious person, you cannot help but be more curious.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah, it fascinates me from talking about the aviation aspect because I'd been interested as a kid. Like I had a toy of the F-19 and the Blackbird and the X-planes and all this. But then you see this stuff and like we're on what Gen 5, there's probably Gen 6 in a hangar somewhere already, but this stuff's a different tree, it's not even working on propulsion, combustion. There's black projects and then there's whatever this is, and this is a lot closer to magic than anything that we can build, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, and just when you see something like that, but there's no noise
Yeah.
with it, you know, that's almost one of the that's equally as weird as what you're seeing, is that there's no noise to it.
Yeah.
But in the defense of people who go, huh, yeah, that's pretty good. That's what I did with that. What I thought was, I wrote off as a weather balloon until I
Oh
saw
yeah. I've
something
been
else.
there. I've been there myself too, many times.
Yeah,
And rationalized and written things off, be like they couldn't have been, just, stop thinking about it. But
yeah,
then after some time, you get something like that, and you're like, that was definitely anomalous, right?
yeah. You can't deny, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then that's what made me kind of go look back and say, I wonder if that thing was a weather balloon. Like, let me just look up what weather balloon is. And I was like, wow, that's, you know, they all have something hanging from them, or they're a weird teardrop, upside down teardrop shape, or, you know, none of them are perfectly round with nothing around them.
Right. They've always got a tether or something to tie them off. They have
Right.
to,
Right.
otherwise.
And they move.
Yeah. 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 I've
Yeah,
seen plenty of weather balloons in the Air Force, and it's pretty obvious when you see a weather balloon. You look at it, you're like, oh, what's that white thing up there? And you look at it, and you're like, oh, it's a balloon.
Yeah. I mean, a balloon is,
Yeah.
you can tell what a balloon. Yeah. But that other thing I filmed now, so now I'm always, I got usually I don't carry my phone in my own yard, right? Um, and I wish that I did, back then, because that would have been, that was a long, that whatever that was that floated straight up, it took a long time to get. I could have run in and got my phone, but I was just too mesmerized, and I was afraid that I was going to miss it if I left. So yeah, but now I can bring my phone. So I've recorded. I think Jeff and I are in agreement that it was probably a satellite, that video I sent you, Jeff. But
Yeah, could be.
it looked so low and bright to me. We see satellites all the time out here, and it looks like a star slowly moving across the sky. This was so much brighter. The sun had recently set, so it could have been that.
Gotcha.
Um, explain the brightness, but yeah. So now I'm trying to catch whatever I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think, I mean, it's easy to go uh, too far down the rabbit hole, but I think from my experience, there seems to be almost like a gamesmanship where it knows if you've got your phone on you. I've done this thing with a couple of people where they call it CE5, where you sit outside and you kind of meditate and try and get stuff to turn up. And the first couple of times I did it, I'd got cameras set up, I'd got tripods, I was on like a wide angle lens and stuff. Nothing. So then we all decided, well, we'll just leave our phones in the house, and then it turns up. And then there was a time where I saw this like blood red orb thing behind my mum's house in Spain, and I watched it for a couple of minutes, which is a lot longer than you think. It was
yeah,
just bobbling its way down this hillside. And I was in my head, I was like, what on the hell is that? Like, is it a paper lantern? No. Is it, it's not a helicopter, it's below the horizon. That where it is about 30 yards away from me. There's no electricity there, there's no houses. Right, it's an orb. And the second I put my hand out to grab my phone, which was on charge next to me, it just went whoop, gone. So either that's a coincidence or
right.
I felt like it was almost aware of my attention for a second and was like, nope, that's it. You've seen the ankle, that's enough for you.
That's great. Yeah, I've heard other people say that as well. Now that I'm in it and watching podcasts of all types. But I don't know if either of you saw Rogan's. Speaking of going down the rabbit hole, Rogan's podcast with Jesse Michaels recently.
Yeah, I'm about 2 hours into it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
I really like Jesse Michaels' podcast.
Yeah,
me
he's
too.
one of the best for sure.
That guy's so smart. It just
He's his ability to retain like dates and names and
oh
information and the inside of books, not just the back.
yeah
The
yeah
guy's a machine. I really
yeah
respect him for that, and I really like the way he edits his stuff as well because it's accessible for people that you're trying to casually get interested in the subject and be like, oh, just watch this and see what you think, and they
yeah
can get a lot out of it, and then all the hardcore nerds are there taking notes from the small print
yeah.
and really getting the best out of it as well. So yeah, he really knows what he's doing.
I also saw you on I forget whose podcast it was, but it was somebody who filmed some guy with long hair who filmed the orb with Bledsoe. I think he was
Oh
with,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
Peter,
you
Peter.
could see sort of this plasma thing going on inside the. That's
Yeah,
that's
that
pretty crazy.
that is,
It's
I mean,
disturbing.
Doesn't it look like when you see high res images of the sun, you can,
exactly.
when you see the plasma moving around? I mean,
100%. For me, I was like, where have I seen something kind of mottle and look like that? And I used to have a toy plasma ball. Those ones you put your hands
yeah,
on and it'll like
yeah,
arc. And when you look at the ball in the middle, it would do exactly that. You'd have this kind of almost like it's breathing look to it, and then you'd have the
Yeah.
dark patches where the plasma was more concentrated in other areas, and that was the closest thing I could see to that. But I only saw that footage about 2 minutes before we actually began the
Oh,
recording, so I was
wow.
still kind of I just got time to pick my jaw up off the floor before we started going. But it's I can't believe how good that is.
Yeah.
And yet, when you read the comments, I mean, 90% of the people are either neutral or, interested in the findings, but there's still people that are like, "Oh, that's Venus, you idiots." And it's like, "No, come on. Like that's not we know what bokeh is. We know
Right.
what like I've seen plenty of pictures of Venus. Like this is weird. We're not saying what it
Yeah.
is, but it's
Right.
worthy of being considered weird at least, you
Right.
know?"
Absolutely. You got to
Um
just tune those people out. I mean, you can't.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I was invited to a conference in Madrid last year, and like we had 3 days. It was amazing. We met all these experiences and people that were really fascinated in the subject. But then you walk out the front gate and you realize, yeah, we've just been hanging out with say 300, 400 people, but there's like 5,000 people in front of me, and none of them give a rat's ass about the stuff that we've
Right.
just been talking
Right.
about. So it kind of pulls you back down to earth again. But you have to ask like, what's it going to take, to
Yeah.
get people in this difficult to live in modern world to go like, oh, wait a minute, that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if something landed and someone got out, you know, I still think there'd be people that would go, that was staged. Like
Yeah,
that was some sort of hoax. They
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
believe it. I mean, I think there's always going to be doubting Thomases, you know?
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
Absolutely. Well, that's why it was important for me to actually see it with my own eyes because up until 2005, I hadn't, and all these other people around me in the military were telling me about craft and objects. And then, and I believed them. But there's something different about when you actually see it with your own eyes and it becomes concrete.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh my, like here we
And
go down the
you
rabbit.
can no longer write it off as not anomalous or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
And especially if you see multiple things. Like you see one thing, you can go, huh, I don't know. But you see three things, all of them different, all of them anomalous, and it becomes impossible to for me to write off anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Like,
what's the point of even trying to convince yourself otherwise at that point, right?
yeah. I mean, how
It's
many
like
times can
trying
you
to convince
say,
yourself there's, not a wildfire or something. It's like
right?
it's there,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I often think the only way I can kind of relate the experience to people that haven't experienced anything like that. And I'm not saying like, oh, we're in this cool club or anything. It's just a different state of mind. Is when I was a kid, I was very lucky. My mum took me to Florida and I watched the space shuttle take off.
Cool.
Wow.
And it was the most life-changing thing I've ever experienced. Like it was so violent and like beyond volume. It was like somebody shaking you whilst you're falling down a hill, and then to think like there's people sat on top of that thing. It was such a humbling internal experience that you just can't explain. It's like going to an amazing heavy metal gig. You can never really get across what that meant to you. And I think this type of experience is a similar thing. It flicks a load of switches on the inside of you, doesn't it? And it's just really
Yeah.
hard to kind of explain that in a way that doesn't sound like you're just trying to make yourself sound cool.
Yeah. I was driving around out here one day and there was apparently a missile test. I don't know if it was on Kauai or I don't know where it was, but I mean, I saw this thing, this missile, shoot up and leave this, billowing trail that eventually drifted and faded. But I mean, that was amazing. Just seeing something that size go as that fast straight up. I mean, and I was struggling to like driving, watching this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you know what that is, right? Like, so it's not knowing what something is that adds a whole heap of wow into the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
How,
what kind of makes me think about this whole idea that we have next generation like anti-grav tech. And Jesse Michaels lays out the case for that, right? Pretty
Sure.
well. It's like he
Going
kind
way
of,
back.
yeah, and he uncovers the whole thing and puts
Yeah.
it together comprehensively. It's like, wow. But then I wonder, then why are we still messing around with regular chemical rockets? Why are we launching, why is
Oh
Elon
man.
messing around with these rockets if 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago we developed anti-grav tech and we're just keeping it on the down low?
If
At
you
some point, it's like that's got to break out, right?
When you watch the rest of that Rogan interview, they talk about, I don't remember the lady's name, but somebody has a theory that there's a whole other breakaway society. And I mean, that's rabbit hole
Yeah,
stuff.
I've heard that too.
That seems, you don't want to say impossible because then you feel like an idiot if you're wrong, but you don't want to say possible because you feel like because it would be so huge that it's almost inconceivable to think of being possible, right? But yeah, I mean, that would be one explanation for why, like all the combustion stuff is just still to keep us believing we don't have the other.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that's, like I said, I don't know about that. I mean, I don't, that's somebody's theory. I don't know whose theory it was. I forget the name, but that's
But
some
when you
crazy
go
stuff.
down the rabbit hole, there's enough breadcrumbs there for certainly me to be convinced that something happened. And Hal Puthoff's alluded to it, and he knows more than anybody. That there's a guy Thomas Townsend Brown, and he was dealing with electromagnetics to create lift. And there's videos of the guy applying a current to these like triangle and circular rings and stuff, and they're rising up and they're just held down by a bit of string and wobbling around. And obviously it's a big step to go from just making something levitate. I mean, this spinning thing here is levitating on a magnet. So if I've got that, what's Lockheed Martin got? You know.
Right. And that guy was what year was that? That was like early 1900s or something, wasn't it?
Very early 1900s. And Jesse Michaels found out from Harold Malmgren that he
Yes.
was working with Nikola Tesla. And I've got a letter that Townsend Brown wrote to the Navy and the Department of Defense. And he basically said, right, I've cracked anti-gravity. Um, I can make a something like a 30-ton tank. You could push it with one hand. Um, and he sent them a structure for what he needs. It was like this umbrella. Here's the Department of Defense. I need this. I need this scientist. I need all these logistics. It's going to cost you X amount of money. Get back to me and we can get this started straight away. And then the trail just goes bonk. So you're telling me that
They didn't.
we've, yeah, exactly. We've gone from triplanes to God knows what. The F-22 in just about 100 years, and yet we're still dealing with petrol and blowing it out the back, and it's crazy that we've not branched off.
Well, yeah, if we haven't. It's the same with remote viewing, right? That started when it started, and then it apparently stopped. There's no way if that was working,
Yeah.
There's no way they said, nah, let's just stop doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. The successes that they had with that are remarkable. Jimmy Carter said the weirdest thing he saw was when a psychic lady found a crashed Tupolev 22 in the African jungles. And Russell Targ, who started Operation Stargate with Hal Puthoff, he was told, and he said publicly, and the guy's still alive and still telling the story, that they said, no matter how successful this is, we have it will end, and it has to publicly end, because otherwise we'll have no military secrets. If everybody out there realizes that this is a viable thing to do, all the weirdos like we've got here, working for you, how many of them are out there? And it,
Mm-hmm.
you can't lock a filing cabinet from somebody that can just look inside it. So
Yeah.
it's preposterous to me that they just went, oh well, that was fun. Let's stop that. They even traded on the silver market, for God's sake. They had a 70% win rate on the silver market, trading in silver. Um, it's outrageously interesting what they were
Well,
doing.
that'd be a way to fund their budget, wouldn't it?
Yeah, 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 yeah. They were. It started. I mean, Hal Puthoff did an interview again with Jesse Michaels and Eric Weinstein. Um, and Hal Puthoff's just like, I'm not going to convince you this is real. I'll just show you how to do it, and then you can just do it and just get back to me when you're happy.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, endlessly fascinating. I mean, so many aspects, every direction. Makes you wonder if, sci-fi, like, there's no fi.
Exactly, right?
It's just sci, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, I had a
crazy.
joke. I think I told Tom that maybe all the Bigfoots that they're seeing are just a Wookiee that crashed. He's trying to fix his hyperdrive up in the Pacific Northwest.
I mean, I mean, would you doubt it at this point? Like, there's so many rabbit holes to go down, and it's it's almost like you want to just keep your mind open because of it's already been so many crazy things have already borne out as reality
Yeah.
that you feel silly saying that's impossible. That's impossible. I mean, how many things that used to be impossible are now seen all the time, and it's beyond crazy. But I love it. I mean, I love it. It's so interesting, and it's just I can't get enough podcasts, and I can't watch enough UAP videos, and you always wonder. I always try to figure out if there's a lot of nonsense, obviously, but parsing through it is a little bit of the fun.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've had to constantly update, my thinking about every aspect of this top. Like, for example, you were just talking about, I have a good friend that is all in on the Galactic Federation. They're like, there's definitely a Galactic Federation, and they go through all the different races and how they interact and the whole structure of it. And when I first met that person, it was like, I was like, they're totally normal, rational, competent, intelligent human beings. And then they're talking to you about the Galactic
Crazy stuff.
Federation. But then that's the problem. Like, there are breadcrumbs that pour out. And you had, what's his name? Ashed from
Yeah,
the
Chaim Ashed and Paul
Ashed,
Hellyer.
and Paul Hellier from
Oh, Paul
Canada.
Hellyer.
And,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they come out and they start talking about these things. And then you're like, oh my God, like I have to update, I have to start looking in down into this Galactic Federation rabbit hole. And
Like,
then you find
all these
breadcrumbs.
people cannot be crazy, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you need to be sane to have a lot of these positions they have, right? They go
Yeah.
through, right? So it becomes harder to deny when people like Paul Hellier or the defense, what was it, the Iranian
Chaim
defense?
Ashed from Israel. Yeah.
Yeah, Israel. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it just when you hear them say things like that,
Yeah.
it's jarring. It's very jarring.
Yeah. And then
Robert
most of
Salas.
the,
Oh, sorry, Jeff.
I was just going to say, most of the public, they hear that and then they go, okay, and they go about their day. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. As I was gonna say, like Robert Salas, he was there in a nuclear bunker. Like he's trusted to have the keys to a nuke, and then he had this experience of this giant red orb turning up and terrifying everybody. He's way underground, ready to push a button, and all of his security staff are calling and radioing and freaking out and stuff like that. And when that guy tells you something happened, like there isn't a higher level of trust on the planet than the guy that you trust to launch nuclear missiles if it needs.
100%,
And
100%.
I think that the problem that we have as a field is that people like Commander Fravor that saw the Tic Tac and stuff, most people that are experience him for the first time on a podcast, they he goes into the box of a UAP guy, but like he's one of the most successful combat pilots. He was like first over the border in Iraq. The Black Aces had 11,500 combat hours, all successful in Iraq. So if that guy tells you he's seen, a 40-foot white oval craft, he has. It's not a seagull.
Sure.
It's nobody has the right to overrule that guy. You
Right.
know,
Or any of them. Ryan Graves, like they all present like super intelligent, well spoken, sane, perfectly sane people. And
absolutely.
I feel like this community, as many views as yours and everybody's podcast gets, it's people who are already into it.
Yeah.
Right. It's not getting out to, like the major networks are not covering this. News Nation is the only sort of cable network, I guess, that's covering this stuff. And I just don't think it reaches, as many as it needs to reach to be more widely accepted. It's like a niche still.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to get around that, but I think that's what kind of needs to happen.
Well, I think
Yeah,
people like you coming out, James, is a huge part of that. I think that just your average people in the public, I think many of them have seen things just like we have, and many of them have written it off. They're like, that was weird, but whatever. And then
Yeah.
many of them might see another thing in their lifetime. And I think it provides people with comfort when people like you come out and you're like, listen, I'm a regular human being. Uh, I've got some, you're a public figure, but then you come out and you're like, here's what I saw. And then other people were like, that's exactly what I saw in Ohio like 25 years ago. And that's how it's going to build. It's like case by case, incident by incident. And the more just regular folks that come out and start talking about
Yeah.
it, the better it'll be. And then people, because that's what happened with me. Like I was not going to come out publicly until I met Ryan Graves. And then I'm like, okay, this guy is like kind of
Legit.
forged a path through the snow
Sure.
and that I could follow and then come out on the stage and reduce all that stigma,
So how long were you between when you experienced something to where you felt safe to talk about it? How long a period was that?
It was like 20 something years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because for me, it was a little bit more difficult and
'Cause
easier at the same time because I had the actual documentation. So that was a bit of a limiting factor because it was real, authentic Air Force military paperwork
yeah,
that you can't just throw out into the public. And it also had some protected information on it. So I had to be careful with it. And I didn't want to out anyone because, these are real people that have had these experiences. They're documented and chronicled in this paperwork. And I didn't want to just out them and have whoever calling them up or showing up at their house.
sure.
So I had to kind of be careful. And then the big thing for me was the stigma, because of my profession, I was involved in law enforcement and all these other things. I have like my career was very reputationally based. And I was worried about that. Like I can't come out, babbling about UFOs until like Ryan and some of these other people kind of paved the way. And that goes all the way back to like Rob Salas and Bob Jacobs and all these people with the courage that came out decades ago, and Kehoe and just all those historic figures that they already did this.
Yeah.
They came out and they had their hearings and gave their testimony, and they had the momentum, but then it got churned under by the system.
Yeah.
And then I was part of that new wave that came out, but that was because of Ryan Graves and Dave Fravor and all those other people that had the courage to come out. But yeah, when I did the Merge podcast, I was as nervous as I've ever been in my life. I was just like, yeah, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I was going public.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I was slightly nervous about doing this a
it's a
little
big
bit.
deal, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even though I told you, in a sort of I guess it was a private Zoom setting or whatever, but yeah, I mean, I was like, okay, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
It was the same for
That's
me.
good.
Like 5 years ago, I had zero skin in the game and a perfectly normal career, and then even now, I mean, now I've given up caring. Because at the end of the day, I'm telling the truth, so
Yeah,
I don't have any uh, about it. But when I first started seeing stuff, it was really alienating because I was like, and particularly now, I'll bump into old friends that I used to work with or that I've not seen for a few years, and they're like, "Oh, how are you doing, man? What are you doing? How's work?" And I'm like, "Well, now I make podcasts about UFOs," and they're like, "What?" And it's like a complete redefinition, and that does take courage. It doesn't matter what your experience was. If you're gonna switch how people perceive you, like that's a deep breath moment, man.
it is. It really is. I think I started after I saw the first thing. I started with really close friends. Just, have you seen anything weird ever in the sky? Like I want them to go first, and then I go, yeah, me too. But nobody did. Nobody's like, no. What do you mean? Like I'm like, I'm just wondering. Like, never mind. Yeah, yeah,
But
Yeah.
what I think is really powerful, though, as Jeff touched on, is when people like yourself come forward with their encounters, and you're not doing it for the sake of entertainment and selling books or, like building a brand around yourself or anything. Like you've done that. That's if anything, this would be a distraction to that. Same with
yeah.
Dave Fravor. He's the guy's he doesn't need another cool story,
No, right.
and yet people with the courage to come forward and say, "Yeah, this is true. This happened." Do,
It's
what are you
it
going to say
seems like
about that? Yeah.
it seems all downside to come
Yeah.
out. Yeah, it just seems like you're going to get mocked, you're going to be not believed, you're going to, like that's the stigma. And I just decided there's been enough people now that have gone before me that I feel okay joining that group, and we'll all be whatever together. But
Right.
there's no
Yeah.
reason to fabricate and come on, because what are you gonna, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to do that. So yeah, I mean, it feels good. It feels good, I gotta say, because just talking to people that have, like you guys, that have experienced other things, it makes you feel less crazy, less, alone or whatever, right? Because
Yeah.
still, I've not found any friends. I did recently. I went on a trip to Virginia. You guys know, and my friend that I visited said that she had her really good friends who she's known her whole life saw three lights at night that were flying. She couldn't remember if they were flying around separately and then joined in a group and took off, or if they showed up in a group and then split up and flew around. But it was definitely a formation and a, you know, singularly flying around and formed and took off, or the reverse of that. Which either way, that's strange. And so became fascinated and is now looking up all the time just because her really close friend, she totally believes in, you know,
Yeah.
got her convinced that it's real. So I kind of mentioned this to her and she was like, that's great, you ought to do it. And I was like, I don't know, you know. She's like, you got to do it. And I was like, okay, I'll do it.
Well,
Hey,
I promise you, there'll be no CGI aliens and like synthesizer music like we used to get in the 80s and 90s about it. Yeah, you know like it. You know, I'm not one to criticize anybody or anything. Anything that gets people talking about it is a good thing. But when you see really interesting footage, but then somebody's added like horror film music over the top, you're just like, it's cool enough. It doesn't
Yeah,
need sugar on the top, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So
I did
is
add that thing I filmed that I thought was that we think is a satellite. I did add some music. It's not like dramatic. I guess it is. I guess it's sort of dramatic music, but I did it because I think it's a satellite. Sort of. I mean, I still don't know because it was so bright and weird,
it
and
does look very odd, yeah,
it
but
seems too
indeterminate.
low
Yeah,
and just too low. Like it didn't seem like it was in space. It's
right.
um, but again, there was nothing. There was no strange flight pattern. There was no speed. It was the speed of a satellite. It was a straight trajectory of a satellite. Um, the only thing there was is, sometimes you'll see a satellite and then it'll enter the shadow, and so you won't see it anymore.
Mm.
This never did. This just sort of, you know, the only thing I couldn't see anymore is because it went beyond my neighbor's roof, which blocked my view. But yeah, I put some music to that. I probably ruined it, but
no, I think it's like Jimmy from the UAP Files. That like that's a podcast that I'm lucky enough to co-host, and his Instagram's awesome because he'll get like decent music that fits the footage, and it
yeah,
doesn't make you, it's not silly atmospheric spooky stuff. It's just good music, and good
yeah.
music makes everything better. So I'm
I
all
think
for
this was
that.
the standard Apple Shogun. It was called, and it's just kind of it's I don't know. It is what it is.
Well, I got to ask, is there sort of a side of it that interests you more? Whether it's the sort of secret tech or the spiritual side or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know about the spiritual side. I mean, I just don't know about that. So the tech, obviously, and if it is, whether it's our tech, that's interesting. Whether it's off-world, other dimension, whatever it is, it's all interesting. And if we're not alone, I would like to meet whoever it is. I mean, why not? I mean, I think that would be, just the most interesting thing that's ever happened. You meet somebody from another anything, right? If you meet somebody when you go travel into, when I go to England and I meet people, it's the greatest thing. So I think, how many questions would you have for somebody from another planet or solar system, or I mean, it would just be mind blowing.
Yeah.
I think that's the tech, and the possibility of not being alone is the most interesting thing for me. I know Bledsoe is heavy on the spiritual thing. I just don't know. I just don't. Could be. I'm not saying he's wrong, obviously, but I can't. I don't know. What do you think?
Honestly, I started off wanting to know about the machine side of it, and then the weird side of it kind of overtook that for me because I figured like the first two things that I saw, it was, I can only describe it as like a call and response thing. Like the very first time, Jeff's probably sick of me telling this story, but the first time I'd heard about people basically either praying or meditating, or one guy was just on a hike and was like appreciating the beauty, and then this light turned up, and so I didn't like, I wasn't, in a lotus position or anything like that. I just said in my head, like, go on then, if this is real, show me, that'd be really cool. And then exactly where I was looking, there was this big blue, like a Christmas light kind of coming on and then going off like that. It was really weird. So that, because I hadn't just had my eye caught by something going past, that I was like, oh, that's weird. It was more like a interaction. Then it really dragged me onto the, like, what the hell, what's going on from that side. And then I got into all the remote viewing side and the Russell Targs, and then you just keep seeing all these crossovers, and then now you hear people like Lakatsky, the guys that were on the inside of a back engineering program, if there is one, and they're saying, like, we can't do anything with it. We need a hippie. Basically, they're saying, like, this doesn't work with a joystick. It's consciousness based. So then it's like, well, okay, how does consciousness work? And there's another giant rabbit hole to go down. So
Yeah, that's interesting. I think as much or more than anything else is what is consciousness? Like why, is this ability, this psionic thing, can everybody do it? And you just need to practice, or is it limited to, a few people? I mean, that interests me too. Like I would really like to, I mean, if I could summon things, I don't think I'd be doing anything else all day long. I think I'd just be outside summoning things left and right. But that's another interesting thing about that video that I'll keep calling it a satellite is that was my first attempt at trying to summon something. And I was, you sit there and you feel half nutty even trying it, right? And you're like, what am I doing? But I just stuck with it, and I was like, what's going to come of you? It's either going to work or it's not. So I just did it, and then I looked up and I saw this light coming, and I went, oh my God. I ran in and grabbed my phone, and I came back out and I started shooting it, and I filmed it all the way across the sky. And I sort of was like hoping that it would do some brightening or strobing or something, and it just didn't. And I was like, okay, so it's just a satellite. And it's just, but that's a crazy coincidence, is that, I mean, within seconds or a few minutes of me trying this, and it wasn't even dark yet, So that was just a weird coincidence that I tried.
Welcome
that.
to the world of weird coincidences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, next time you see one, try to interact with it. Tell it to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems so crazy, but yeah.
Well, my first CE5 attempt, I did it with a group of people out in San Francisco back in, that was March. And we got results. We got multiple contacts.
How many people were there?
We had, in our group, there was about 7 or 8 of us. It was at a UFO, it was the UAP hackathon, where they brought in all these tech people and innovators to try to solve UAP problems in technology and software and artificial intelligence. It was phenomenal. And we did it on the USS Hornet, which is a World War II aircraft carrier. Mm-hmm. And that's where we were having the event. And one evening, we all went up on the deck of the ship and we tried the C5 protocol. And there was a big group of people, maybe 20 or 30 people at the front of the ship. And there was a small group of us in the rear where it was dark. And we had multiple people that saw things just for an instant. Some of them, like 2 people would see the same thing. Other people would just see like a flash. And then I saw a flash. But then we had like a 2.5 minute orb show up. and we recorded it with a high quality video camera, and it had night vision. And for 2.5 minutes, this thing just slowly traversed the sky at low altitude, and we all just watched it, and it eventually just vanished. And it's like, wow, it worked.
Yeah.
I want
I
to
mean,
try it again for sure.
yeah. I mean, like I said, I'd be doing nothing else if I proved to myself that I could do that. I mean, because what do you think about the Skywatcher?
I think it's fascinating
It's
what they're doing.
fascinating, but are they um, are they? Do you think that they are funded by the corporations that want the tech, right? Rather than, I heard somebody say that they don't know where their funding comes from, which kind of is a red flag sometimes,
I
right?
think they've been pretty open about their funding. I've had a chance to meet some of the Skywatcher team. If and I don't want to mess this up, but I think they do have multiple funding venture capitalists that they're working with, and I think
Oh,
Alex Klokus is one of them. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe he's on their team, and he's the type of person that can make that happen. So he could set up like venture capitalists, people that are interested in the tech. But I know that they're also working in partnership with the government. So I don't know how much funding they're receiving, if any, but they kind of have to be in partnership with the government because they're using radar and things like that. And
oh
you
yeah, sure.
simply cannot conduct those types of operation without coordinating with the FAA and other agencies. So
I definitely want to see more from them because they put out some crazy stuff. That was pretty amazing.
yeah,
Um, you
yeah,
know,
and they've documented some insane, like unbelievable things, like a helicopter being held like in air. It
yeah,
wasn't able to go forward. It could move in certain directions, but whatever the object was preventing it from moving.
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, so they're getting some really cool information, and I like the way that they're approaching it. They're going at it with good intentions and a good mindset, and they're looking for peaceful contact. So, yeah, I'm very interested in what they're doing.
Yeah. And anybody, like, I know a lot of people say, well, those images are blurry and far away, but if you've ever tried to zoom in on an airliner, just a regular seven whatever, that's even low, it's hard to keep it in frame. It's difficult. So something that far away and high is going to be just almost impossible to image.
Yeah,
So the fact that they got anything, um, and what they did get, I thought was pretty amazing. The jellyfish thing is like, what could that even be? I mean,
yeah, and
what?
that's the thing. Some of the work that Jimmy and Tom have done with Peter, getting some of these images enhanced. The things look like biological. They look alive. They look like they're like giving birth or spawning things. Some of it's really like disturbing.
You know what it reminded me of? The one, you know how the it would sort of pulsate through the, I guess I don't want to say, I mean, tentacles, whatever you want to, they're calling them sort of tentacles. Um, it reminded me of the deep sea things you see that are bioluminescent, and that has a pulse that runs through. So
Yeah.
is it really that crazy to think that something that already exists could exist in a different uh, atmosphere or whatever
Yeah,
environment?
and that's part of my like one of the tracks I'm kind of like thinking out right now is the possibility that something evolved here deep in the ocean and became conscious like humans. God only knows how, like a billion years ago or 2 billion
Mm-hmm.
years ago, right? Or who knows how long. And they've been operating in the deep ocean for a long period of time. They've got their own civilization. What it's alien from us because it's a deep sea creature. And then they started to explore. And when they came up and popped out of the ocean, their outer space is where we're at, and they're
Yeah.
floating around like, what are these mammals doing? You know.
Yeah. Did
So
you
that
see
that
Chris
yeah.
Ramsey's post this morning on LinkedIn? He talked about, if he was going to seed the galaxy, he would, put things on it was a really interesting exercise in, um, he would man the ships with not beings, but, uh, sort of robots or whatever that were if
Van
biological.
machines.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you would have nothing in the ship except for the what it was tasked to do. Um, it was really very interesting because it kind of goes along that line of something evolving from the ocean. And
Yeah.
I mean, can you write anything off at this point?
Absolutely
I
not.
mean,
That's
you
the
have
And
to.
problem, right? That is the
but
problem. We can't write anything off at this
You got
point.
to be open to. I mean, there's been so much crazy stuff that it feels ridiculous to say that couldn't be it. That's too far fetched.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that's a really healthy mindset. And when you, so one thing that I keep thinking about, like I don't have any conclusions. I think
Right.
that's my step one is don't ever say I've got my mind made up because
Until I
that's when
meet
you look
someone.
stupid. Yeah, yeah, until it tells me firsthand, we have a handshake, then I'm not going to presume to understand. Because like my dog is an order of complication lower than me, and it hasn't got a clue what tax is and why I put petrol in the car, but it knows my behaviors and
Hmm.
it knows how to interact with me. And we're the same with whales. There's so many complex organisms out there that we're just realizing actually have got language and identities and stuff like that. But if you, even just in human terms, if you have a hostile environment or a hazardous, shall we say, environment, although I think we're kind of hostile, you don't
Hmm.
go yourself. Like from a very anthropomorphic point of view, if we wanted to go to the moon, we send the thing off without a human crew because then you haven't got the risks there. You haven't got to feed them. You don't need a toilet on board. They don't need snacks. All of this stuff. And then when it gets there, you log in, control the thing, do its job, and then get on with your daily life, and you're safe back at base. I mean, I think my own interpretation, if it's a mechanical thing that we're seeing, is something a lot more like that is more likely than actually jumping in a spaceship like Marvin the Martian and
Sure.
scooting off across the galaxy yourself. That's got risks.
That's kind of the vibe of this Ramsey post this morning. On that's kind of it. Yeah, I mean, I wonder what government agencies like NSA, how much do they know? Like, my dad worked in the IG office.
Oh,
Yeah.
He
Um,
saw all the dirt.
yeah. I wonder because, of course, he never said anything. He was straight up, I can't tell you anything. Or he would just go, oh, no, that's not, like pretend it just silly. Um, but I don't know, what he did even within that office. So who knows if he was privy to or what. But I always wonder, like, did he take something because he's gone now? But did he take something with him that he could have told me, or did he know nothing?
yeah.
I
Or did
feel
he?
a lot
Did
of
he?
people have taken the information to the grave. I really do.
Yeah. I hope Hal Puthoff doesn't.
Oh, me too. Me too. The two people I would love to hear everything from is Hal Puthoff and Jim Semivan. I think those two guys have got some serious meat in the sandwiches, if you if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Who
Yeah.
was the guy you mentioned his name? That Jesse Michaels interviewed. He's now gone.
Harold
Harold
Malgrim.
Malmgren, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that guy had a lot of info. He was just that was amazing. I
Yeah.
That
mean,
that one to me, disclosure has happened multiple times. that was another one of them. That was a
Another step.
to me. That was
Yeah.
like a president coming out,
Yeah.
that same stature.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
then the response kind of backs up my preposition because they immediately attacked his credibility. They edited his Wikipedia page. They made it sound like he was just some minor bureaucrat that was involved in like international trade functions. So,
That response is so uh, just obvious and ridiculous at this point. Like it happens with everybody. Grush, everybody that comes out. It's almost childish. It just
but
seems silly.
effective. But it
I
is
guess.
effective. Yeah.
I mean, but for me, it isn't. Like when that happens, it almost confirms what they were saying is, that they're credible. I don't. I guess it works with some people who just don't want to admit or don't. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just seems crazy that works.
It does work for people just jumping into it. Like, let's say this month somebody finds out, they get the itch to look into UFOs. They find out about Jesse Michaels and Harold Malgrim. Then they start Googling, and they're like, "Oh, this is nobody." On
Yeah.
Wikipedia, he's nobody. He's just some dude.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how it's effective. And then play that forward a generation from now, 25 years from now. And what does the internet look like? What does the historical record look like?
Right.
Not good.
Right.
Yeah.
I know
AI.
that they
Long
changed
game.
Hal Puthoff's Wikipedia to say um, UFO like
Yeah.
something like physicist, UFO enthusiast, and conspiracy theorist. The guy's like a cutting edge theoretical physicist. He's had an absolutely astounding career. And in summary, if you're just like, oh, who's this guy I saw on a podcast? He seems interesting. You'd go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And
So
that's
Joe Rogan was a minor influential entertainer
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
an amateur comedian.
yeah.
Fear
That's
factor
what I
host.
say 25 years from now. It's like, really? Okay.
But it's so I I can't understand how, and I don't want to understand how that type of person's mind works because they're not the people that we're trying to get interested in this. You're always going to, people didn't want to look in Galileo's telescope back in the day, and there's always going to be that percentage, the very loud percentage that you can't get in. But they always say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and yet they'll ignore a first-hand witness, a second-hand analyst, and listen to a third-hand critic. And that
Sure.
just seems like, come on, if you want to play on the seesaw, then you got it. It works on your side. If you say this was faked and it's lens flare, then recreate it, and then science improves and we can all move on. But there's a different set of
Yeah.
requirements for people on different sides of the fence, and I just think on the basis of equality and science, that's just wrong. That's not.
It's
Yeah.
not wrong. It's dangerous. Like, well, James, you were a police officer for a while, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For 5 years in DC. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine, taking that kind of mentality and you're going to actively ignore all witness testimony. It's like,
Right.
how does that even work? People are saying that they've heard shots fired on this block. And they're like, well, we haven't found any evidence of that. And they're like, well, there's 50 people that said they heard the shots. Well, we're not going to pay attention to that.
That's funny because that's what would happen. The dispatcher would say shots fired. We'd hear it a block away. We'd go over there and people would be like, I didn't see anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're afraid of the retribution they'll get from the
Exactly.
gangs or whatever. But
Yeah. And all these debunking, all these debunkers, they're only effective because they discount all of the witness testimony from all the
Right.
cases, whether it's Gimbal or Go Fast, or they're ignoring the pilots saying, look at him, dude, there's a whole fleet of them. They're like, ignore that. It's a bird.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm not a religious person, but I could see that if you were, you wouldn't really want to believe in this stuff, right? You would sort of want to write it off as, nah, it can't be. It's anything you would grab to write it off, because that means, I mean, that's think of that shift. Like
Yeah.
your whole life you've right, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden you have to now reevaluate, and that's scary. Like
Yeah.
I remember when I started getting away from religion, my sister is very religious, and I would have, sort of these, I would think they were going to be like healthy debates, and it did not go over well. It was
Never
just,
does.
yeah, it was just a wall. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. Like, I can't talk about that. I'll just,
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, I could just from that, you can imagine. And I guess these people in the Pentagon who are doing the debunking still and trying to keep it all under wraps, somebody was saying that a lot of it is because of their religion, and
Yeah.
that just seems, I don't know. I mean, if you're in that position, I feel like that shouldn't come into it. Like it should just be, you should, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know.
I
Yeah.
think I'd never criticize anybody for having faith in anything.
Sure,
I just want to
sure.
say that. But speaking for myself, I would hope that religion and faith can be updated. You could, if you believe it to be true, then cool. Like we can still learn more about it. Whether you're uncovering a Dead Sea Scroll or you're actually witnessing something that you think, oh my God, that's what this thing is from the Bible. Like it doesn't limit, it doesn't take away from your belief to
Yeah,
update it. I mean, the American Constitution, that's got amendments, and that people live and die by that. So it's
sure.
I think it's a very tender subject for people, but like,
I also think faith is different than religion. Um, I mean, spirituality is not necessarily religion. And I have faith that I don't know everything. I know that I don't know everything. And I know there's probably a lot I don't know, and there's something more. What that is, I don't know. Um, but I don't, I feel like religion is a whole separate thing from that. It's like uh, you don't have to be religious to have faith in something else. Um, and like even the Vatican, I've heard come out and say science can coexist and we can, so who would think that they'd be on the forefront of, right?
Yeah.
Like, if they're saying it, I don't know why everybody doesn't just go, yeah, let's be open minded and see where it takes us, because whatever God is, if it exists, and you believe it's all powerful being, how are you going to doubt that it could create things you don't understand? Like, I mean, it just logically, it doesn't make sense to compartmentalize supernatural things. This is true, but no way, you
Yeah.
know.
yeah, that's too weird. And then you read the Bible, and some of the stuff in that is wild.
Weird.
But
Right.
because it's written down, it's like, well, that's totally true though. And so again, I'm not criticizing anything,
No.
but when you compare um things we're seeing now to things which are in, like at the end of the day, religion is somebody's interpretation of something they can't explain, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then it becomes a consensus, and that's how you get a faith, a religious faith. But for example, St. Francis of Assisi, like the story of a burning torch coming down and it treated him harshly, and he died a short time after all his hair fell out. Like he had radiation poisoning. He saw an
That sounds
orb.
like radiation, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like
Yeah.
the way they describe it, it's this ball of it's an orange ball of fire that came down whilst he was in prayer, and it came through the roof. And I'm not saying I'm not telling anybody they're wrong, but when you consider what people are catching on camera now, like that footage that we looked at with Bledsoe, if you were in a pre-technological time and you saw that, your overlays, people have always described this stuff in terms they can understand. The Romans said there were shields in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Um, You know, you look at the nearest thing that makes sense to you, and you put it to that. You know, flying saucers. It's because it looked like a saucer.
Yeah,
You know, so you can imagine
you can only
being back
pull from
then.
your own. You can
Yeah,
only pull from
exactly, exactly.
your
So
own
if your
vocabulary. And, right.
whole life is in religious faith and angels, and then you see this blinding white light turn up, and it doesn't immediately terrify you, that's an angelic experience. If it terrifies you, it's a demonic experience. And
Correct.
I can soon see how the water gets muddy for folks.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
super interesting.
And then we're going to see the emergence of new UFO religions. Those are already here, you know, and
Hmm.
building steam. And there could be, I think, there might be a small percentage of the people in the government that want to keep things under wrap because of that. Because there is potential. Like consider the idea that there's a galactic federation, and we there are people that believe in that 100%. They believe they're part of it. They believe they've been sent here on a mission. And then there's all these factions. And this is almost like a religious belief that they have. And then let's say that there is some type of disclosure by the government. And then you have some people responding badly and they say, well, we know that some people are reptilians and here's who they are. It's the King of England. And they just start naming famous, prominent people, you know. And then things could get really weird because they're like, we have to take out the reptiles. They're here to take
Hmm.
over
Hmm.
humanity.
Hmm. Yeah, people already think that.
Yeah, right. And then you could have people like getting violent, like we have to take the reptiles down, and we know who they are. And it's like, do you? Like,
That's why people were
Right.
burning witches a few hundred years
it's
ago, wasn't it?
exactly
You know,
yes,
there's no
Yeah.
evidence for it. But I mean, that the definition of faith is something that you believe without concrete proof, really, isn't it? You know, it's something that's true to you without needing hard evidence. So
yeah,
I can definitely, because I listen to myself talk, and every now and then I'm like, dude, you sound like a zealot. You know, you
yeah,
sound like you're trying to start a cult, and we know from Heaven's Gate that's a really bad idea.
yeah,
But like at the end of the day, we have a belief that there's something weird going on. And you know, that's where I draw the line. Um I'm not saying it's our particular guardian or anything like that, but
Except we sort of have proof that something weird is going on. It's almost more than faith because you
yeah,
could see whatever you see it.
yeah,
So many people have seen it, filmed it, and
absolutely. I
that's
the one like since I started looking into this over the last few years, every now and then I hear about a case and it just it you kind of feel spaced out because it's like how is this not in a history book? Like you know, the Phoenix Lights was amazing. That was
yeah,
this big black triangle turning up, but then you've got like the Battle of Los Angeles where
yeah,
grand you know they fired like 15,000 rounds and it's like well Jesus, people died. You know, they were
yeah.
crashing cars, having heart attacks. Like, how is
We're
that
not
not?
cheap of it.
How does that not resonate? I was just speaking to some guys from Brazil the other day, and they had in Brazil. There's this official Night of the Sources that they have, where 21 UFOs turned up, and they launched nine F5s, Northrop F5s, with sidewinders on out there to go and do it. Five came back. It was witnessed by thousands of people. The audio tapes of the pilots, I've got them. Like they're out there, and yet it's just, especially in America and the UK, where like what, you know, even for people that are interested in the subject, it's just I can't. It kind of links into what we were talking about at the start. Like some things, it's just there's a certain point where it just goes. Whew.
Or it's just purposely being ignored to keep it from being widely known. You know, whoever knows it now, fine, but let's not talk about it anymore. Let's not put it back in the news. Let's not cover it anymore. Like, why wouldn't you? Like, it happened. I mean, it's not like a made up story that you're not taking the word of somebody out in a field somewhere. And even the DC,
Yeah,
the picture of the Capitol with the,
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy.
yeah,
And that was
That
60 or,
happened. Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
yeah.
happened.
And it didn't just happen once, it was part of a flap. And like it's in the newspapers. There's a couple of really blurry, but there's photographs of it from a time when you couldn't just go on Photoshop and doctor stuff. Like this happened, in the late 1800s, there was sightings across the country of wooden sailing ships in the sky. And at certain points they'd pull up and ask for water and stuff. And it's like, I don't care how you interpret that now. Like, you can't say that something didn't happen because it's too weird. The kids at
Yeah,
the aerial school, you've got different classes, creeds, social groups. These
that's the
aren't kids that
Australian.
would all hang out and share a secret. It was the whole school. It was just a
That's the
cross
Australian
section of
thing.
that whole pizza.
Yeah.
And
It's
they're all
Australia
saying,
or South Africa.
yeah,
Oh,
Zimbabwe, yeah. Sorry, in Zimbabwe. But they all say the same thing, and they're all backing each other up and saying, like, oh, yeah, and it was in my head, and they were saying you've got to protect your planet. And this is at a time before we gave a rat's about ecology and the environment and stuff. So it's like, well, at what point does this update the history books?
yeah. Yeah, well, the media just picks the most pettiest, inflammatory things to cover. And the news cycle is just like that. It's like there's no room for anything else but, you know, and I mean, it just seems like they definitely could cover these things. They definitely could bring this back into the cycle. Why don't they? Is it because they don't believe it, or is it because they don't want it to come in the history books, right? They sort of want to keep it. I don't know. I mean, you got to ask why it isn't, because it's already been reported,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and they rehash stuff all the time. They just don't rehash this stuff.
There's
Yeah.
an author I really like called Peter Lavender, and he made a really good point about this. He said, like, for everybody banging the drum for disclosure, like it's a government's job to maintain stability. It's not a government's job to enlighten you, that the world's a different place. And he said, like, it's a no-win game. It only destabilizes the monolith of government if you start saying that reality is any different to what it is. That's not a strong, stable. You wouldn't buy shares in that thing if all of a sudden they changed their entire strategy. Um,
Sure.
and if they admit anything, then the only outcome is something slightly diminished in terms of security than what they have now. And I thought that was such a really powerful point, because here's all the optimists like myself just going like, oh great, we'll all find out soon and then we'll be in a better place and stuff. And it's like, no, that's not the game plan.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It seems like they're just trying to muddy the water still and make it, keep the stigma going. And I wonder if, I wonder if disclosure will ever, it's happening in a sense that more people are getting involved and we're seeing more things, and you can't deny you can't deny some of these things anymore. But, for the government to come out and say, I don't think that's going to happen.
I
Um,
agree. I don't
I
think that'll
mean, no. And this age of disclosure, what is taking so long for this to be put out? Right? I mean, I haven't, have you seen it?
Yeah, I'm in it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great. I haven't seen it. What, how come do you know why it's not out yet?
I don't. I think Dan is still shopping it around.
Oh,
I think,
wow.
yeah, his thing was he really wanted to get a theatrical release.
Sure.
Those are very tricky.
Yeah.
So I think that's what he's really working on.
Hmm.
But I haven't talked to him, so I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
I'm hoping, I'm waiting just like everybody.
Yeah, I mean,
Can't wait, man.
it's got to be released, I think, sooner than later, or else it starts to, you know, fade from people's memories. I mean, eventually it'll come out,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I mean, that many officials, right,
It,
yourself
it's
included.
un, it's unbelievable, man. It's
Yeah,
just so many people with so much credibility, and it just keeps coming. It just keeps
yeah,
walking you down the hall. It
yeah,
keeps walking you down the hall. So, yeah, man, I hope he can get it out soon.
yeah. Me too. I'm
Yeah,
dying to see it.
I
yeah.
think personally, like, when I think about the D word disclosure, it's I think the closest we'll get is when two people can meet in the street and talk about it with the same level of confidence that you would about a comet going past, or
Hmm.
a cool moon. When we can say like, yeah, I saw something really weird when I was little, and just there's no baggage that comes with it. Like that's
Right,
when we've nailed it. I don't.
right.
We'll all be skeletons before the government tells us, their
Sure.
dirty tricks.
I will say that I have encountered more people um, that seem to not attach the baggage to it. You know, like just friends. Like I started asking, right, and what have you seen? And everyone's like, oh, nothing. But then once somebody does, that's it. Like there is no baggage with that person and anybody they've spoken to. And so I think it's just too slow. You know, it's happening. It's
Yeah,
just, I'm just impatient. I want it to be like now, just come on, get it going.
yeah. But what do you actually want to see happen? Like, what would satisfy you?
Um, just what Tom was saying, just that you could go talk to anybody and they go, wow, or yeah, or cool, or anything that doesn't like just no more doubt about it. Just
Just a new
acceptance.
paradigm. Everybody's on board. Like, yeah, we know there's weird stuff flying around.
We know it's weird. We don't know what it is. Just acknowledge that it's weird and that it's, that's it. I mean, that's an easy first step because it is
Yeah,
weird,
it
but it's
is.
denying, it's weird. It's not weird. It's just something you're seeing. It's
No, you're weird.
yeah,
That's the
yeah, yeah,
response,
yeah.
Yeah,
right?
it's
That
not
was
weird.
weird.
You are.
You're weird.
Right, right. Like we're all
Yeah.
hallucinating,
Like, why
right?
Yeah,
are you guys so weird?
yeah, yeah. But it's like I can't. I don't know. I sound arrogant, but a 100 years ago, we had no idea that bacteria was a thing.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden somebody puts pond water under a microscope and they're like, oh my God, there's this whole other biosphere literally under our feet. And I think there's a kind of arrogance when you consider all the different cultures through the years, from like Sumeria, Babylon, Egypt, and they all thought they'd got the job figured out. And you get to now, and we're like, oh yeah, no, science is pretty much done apart from dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and we've got everything figured out. And like we haven't got a clue, as if we're not going to have more complete eye openers of
Right,
discoveries in the future, and that's
right.
something to look forward to. That's not something to cling on to whatever our current opinions are. It's something to be up to because things aren't going too hot right now in a lot of places around the world, and maybe a different frame of mind might do us some good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, I get the fear of you know upending your or so, upending people's reality. I get that. But if you think about it, as long as this stuff has been seen and documented and going on, like, there's a story about what is it, Truman, you know, uh, right? It goes back to then, like the first recovered craft was in Italy
Yeah.
after Mussolini got out.
Yep.
Um, Considering that, the idea that these something's going to harm us, just I don't know where that comes from. Like, couldn't they have just wiped us out
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, whilst we still
Like,
had spears and they're
yeah,
still trying to get a piece of flint to work, they could have just
right,
gone, "Oh, I can see where this is going." Zap, you know.
right. And I can also see why, you know, the actually it's funny, one of the songs uh I one of my sort of pieces, they're not really a song, it's called Ugly American. And in the beginning, there's an effect on my voice, and it's two aliens observing Earth, and one says, "I'm not going down. You can look, it's pretty, and you can look at it, but we're not going down there." And the other guy goes, "Why not?" And he goes, "Because they still have war and shit down there. They don't give psych tests to their leaders, right?" And you could see why that. You know, if I wouldn't go, if I could see us, and I was an alien on another from another planet, and I went to a planet and saw us with the nukes and the wars and the stupidity going on, I wouldn't want to go down there, right?
Right.
You wind the windows up, lock the doors, and, and
We're like
punch
the
it.
Las
Yeah.
Vegas of the galaxy.
Hey, let's go see those poop throwing monkeys.
Yeah. Right?
Oh, look, they've got hand grenades and motorbikes.
Yeah,
Yeah. It must
right.
be very entertaining. I can imagine it's some sort of amazing reality TV show of like what the humans are up to next. But
And they shoot at us.
Yeah. They keep shooting us with directed energy weapons.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
it's a fun time to be here. That's all I know.
It
It really
is.
is.
It is the most exciting time, I think. For real.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Because you never
Well,
know
guys,
what's going to come out. You feel like you're on the cusp of some new thing at all times.
Yeah.
Which is exciting.
I
So,
totally agree. It's so, I mean, it's like getting into a band that's still in their prime. Like you never know what's coming out next, and it's a really fulfilling and exciting time to be investigating this because stuff's coming out all the time, and like you said before, parsing out the no, I don't think so to the oh, that's interesting stuff. It's so fulfilling a thing to do. You're like on the edge of what we understand, and it's what better adventure is there than that?
and once you see something that changes your that makes it real for you, like you no longer wonder if what everybody else says they see is is just BS, because now you've seen and now you're on that team. And
Yeah.
so it feels like, then like I said, I've seen three things now. So I know at some point I'm going to see a fourth thing, right? And so that is exciting. Like, when is that going to happen? GSP came out recently and talked about what he saw. That was pretty amazing.
Yeah. He's been on a few podcasts really, really well.
Yeah, that was a great story. And there was a carload of people, right? There was a full car.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's exciting for sure.
Awesome. Well, hopefully, guys, we can catch up, and anytime you fancy a cup of tea and a coffee and a chat and about what's going on and how you're feeling about stuff, then we are always up for that, man.
I would love it, man. It's been really fun talking to you guys, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man. Thank you for
Anytime.
reaching out to me and sharing and coming on the channel. We really appreciate it, man. And I want to talk again about your time as a cop in DC. That had to been wild.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. That was I had to get out of that, but that was crazy.
Yeah.
It was a bit, I couldn't see myself doing that for the rest of my life. Credit to anybody who can do that for the rest of their life, because it was some rough stuff.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, let's stay in touch.
Yep. Let's talk soon.
We will.